You know, it's very hard to pay tribute to a guy who's the legend and the face of the organization. Every organization is like a body. It has a brain, a heart, and a soul. Do you mind coming up? I know I like to embarrass you. These are some of Medard's accomplishments that I will not bore you with what he started here. And some of it's under his tenure, some of it is under his inspiration. Some of it is on the walls tonight. One of the more tangible aspects of what can be done from one man's idea and 4 years be propagated throughout the state. That is the kind of man Medard is. I mean, all of you know him in some capacity. Few of us know him in every capacity. And it's very hard to show enough gratitude and tribute, but we certainly hope that he will always be part of this spirit and return next year for a good smile. Thank you, Medard.
Welcome to the 2019 Pacem and Terris Annual Dinner. This important event is dedicated to Mary Starkweather-White. Mary played a huge role in Pacem and Terris. She was involved with Pacem and Terris for over 30 years and a board member for decades. She was Pacem's secretary. She was on our executive committee. She was the chair of our development committee. She was on our finance, governance, and personnel committee. In fact, she was on every committee Pacem has. Mary was a lifelong activist for peace with justice. She was truly remarkable. Mary was also involved with the Delaware citizens opposed to the death penalty from 1992 on. Someone at her memorial service referred to her as a, quote, ordinary woman. My response, somewhat indignant, was that she was the most extraordinary, ordinary person I knew. My job right now is to let you know about the programs, projects that Pacem and Terris is up to in the coming year. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to refer you to this sheet of paper, which will do a much better job of it than I could do. What I want to do is, this is my Last Supper, annual dinner as the executive director of Pacem and Terris, to be a little bit more precise. Thank you also for your sensibilities and sense of responsibility for the state of our world, for you doing something, anything, for showing up, engaging in the noble battle for what is right, for listening to our better angels as we bend that arc of history evermore towards justice. Thank you to the people that I'm privileged to work with each day. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me 2 days ago. Usually I don't deal with things that happen so close at hand because they're a little bit too touchy. Oftentimes when my heart expands, it forces, water out of my eyes. But this one is important. It actually has something. This is where the imagination comes in, to do with Pacem and Terris. So, some of you who follow my wife on Facebook already know of this shocking event. My beloved wife, the love of my life, took me out to dinner. She told me 4 months ago to put this dinner date on my calendar, which I did. It was our 25th wedding anniversary, so, I didn't think it was that I was about to say that important. That's not quite what I meant to say. It was very important, but it seemed like a natural thing to put on my calendar. So somewhere during the dinner, I learned for the first time that we were going to be doing something after dinner. This was not anything that had been mentioned before. So, and after a few inquiries about, well, what are you planning? What's going on? My wife deftly brushed aside these by changing the subject to the impending birth of our first grandchild, which totally, changes the subject in a fairly radical way for me. And I didn't know any more after the dinner than before, but I had some speculations. One was based on a flyer that showed up at our, it was on the table in the living room that talked about Chinese acrobats coming to Philadelphia. So, that sounded like fun. And then we're done with dinner. and she puts into her GPS the next destination. And I overhear the GPS talking about the Kimmel Center, downtown Philadelphia. And oh, that's probably where those Chinese acrobats are. Or maybe it's a concert or something that we'll get to hear some beautiful music. And so we park downtown and we're walking to the Kimmel Center, and we then walk past the Kimmel Center. And I'm, wait a second, what's going on? And we're walking towards the Academy of Music. And oh, that must be where it is. You know, definitely now a musical concert. We walk past the Academy of Music, and I'm looking at her, and anyhow, I'm flummoxed, stumped, and she's not offering any clues. We just keep walking. Now we're on Walnut Street, and I get to a place where sort of not frustrated, but stumped. This is not a usual easy pastime for me. I don't, anyhow, I was not totally uncomfortable. I was enjoying myself, but she was enjoying herself more. And I look up at a marquee that's about as far away from this wall. I don't know why I didn't see it sooner, but it says Hamilton. And this is something that we had talked about before. Gee, wouldn't it be nice to be able to go see Hamilton? But I figured, given the expense of those tickets, that I would probably have to wait until they made it into a film, and then I'd rent it at the Red Box or see it on Netflix or something. And anyhow, we went in, we saw this play, which was the best play I've ever seen in my life. It was magnificent, powerful, important, moving, inspiring, and fantastic music. Everything it was probably the most moving and beautiful night of my life. And so why am I telling you this? Is this just some romantic interlude or something? But it was, it was a heartwarming tale of surprise and shock. But I think the reason I'm telling you this is I think you all are in for a similar surprise and shock as we move forward through the coming years with Pacem and Terris. When I first took this position with Pacem, I didn't know just what it was going to be like. I signed up for this. I was impressed with the organization, what it did, what it was doing, with the board of directors, all of that, but who knew what it was going to turn into? And it turned into Hamilton. I mean, it turned into this beautiful, wonderful, positive, inspiring time of my life, or excuse me, my last annual dinner as the executive director of Pacem and Terris, to be a little bit more precise. And this is where I'm expected to say goodbye and farewell, and I'm not going to do that. Instead of fare thee well, adios, or see you around, I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to express my gratitude, because it always struck me that gratitude was a lot more important than goodbyes. So, number one, thank you for being here. And I don't mean just here and now in this room, but being here with Pacem over the years as it works and worked on creating a culture of peace, a restorative system of justice, a regenerative economy, a healthy environment, and neighborhoods filled with the laughter of children. Thank you for your values and vision of a just and peace-filled world that brought you into this room. This room we all share with our peace-loving activist ancestors, such as Mary Starkweather White and other recently and distantly departed loved ones and heroes, as well as the newly energized youth that have assumed mantles of leadership in the world of climate change, gun violence, and other critical issues facing us. Their presence is truly inspiring. Thank you also for your sensibilities and sense of responsibility for the state of our world, for you doing something, anything, for showing up, engaging in the noble battle for what is right, for listening to our better angels as we bend that arc of history evermore towards justice. Thank you. Getting a little bit more personal rather than philosophical. Thank you to the people that I'm privileged to work with each day. Carolyn Bitzker, Donna Jenkins, Margaret Pfaff, and Mary Brown. Thank you to Pacem's Board of Directors, who you recently got a chance to at least meet them via some words of description of the very new ones, and hopefully you know the ones that were already on our board. And who, you should all know, are making sure that the next executive director of Pacem and Terris will be fantastic. You should not be worried about the next executive director. I'm certainly not. Pacem is in great hands. The board of directors are brilliant, hardworking, and have a sense of purpose and values that will guide Pacem into the future while continuing the work that Pacem does so well. The Executive Director Search Committee is diligently looking over a wonderful pool of applicants and will make an excellent choice for the new Executive Director. He or she will be someone all of you will be excited to work with. This is a great time and opportunity for Pacem and Terris, and your continuing support and input, as it has always been, is vital. All right, to end this expression of gratitude, this is sort of taking a chance here. This is you're going to need some imagination to go along with this one. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me 2 days ago. Usually I don't deal with things that happen so close at hand because they're a little bit too touchy. Oftentimes when my heart expands, it forces water out of my eyes. But this one is important. It actually has something, this is where the imagination comes in, to do with Pacem and Terris. So some of you who follow my wife on Facebook already know of this shocking event. My beloved wife, the love of my life, took me out to dinner. She told me 4 months ago to put this dinner date on my calendar, which I did. It was our 25th wedding anniversary, so didn't think it was that. I was about to say that important. That's not quite what I meant to say. It was very important, but it seemed like a natural thing to put on my calendar. So somewhere during the dinner, I learned for the first time that we were going to be doing something after dinner. This was not anything that had been mentioned before. So, and after a few inquiries about, well, what are you planning? What's going on? My wife deftly brushed aside these by changing the subject to the impending birth of our first grandchild, which totally, changes the subject in a fairly radical way for me. I didn't know any more after the dinner than before, but I had some speculations. One was based on a flyer that showed up at it was on the table in the living room that talked about Chinese acrobats coming to Philadelphia. So, it sounded like fun. And then we're done with dinner, and she puts into her GPS the next destination. And I overhear the GPS talking about the Kimmel Center, downtown Philadelphia. I thought, that's probably where those Chinese acrobats are. Or maybe it's a concert or something that we'll get to hear some beautiful music. And so we park downtown, and we're walking to the Kimmel Center, and we then walk past the Kimmel Center. And I'm, wait a second, what's going on? And we're walking towards the Academy of Music. And that must be where it is. Definitely now a musical concert. We walk past the Academy of Music, and I'm looking at her, and anyhow, I'm flummoxed, stumped, and she's not offering any clues. We just keep walking. Now we're on Walnut Street, and I get to a place where sort of not frustrated, but stumped. This is not a usual easy pastime for me. I don't, anyhow, I was not totally uncomfortable. I was enjoying myself, but she was enjoying herself more. And I look up at a marquee that's about as far away from this wall. I don't know why I didn't see it sooner, but it says Hamilton. And this is something that we had talked about before. Gee, wouldn't it be nice to be able to go see Hamilton? But I figured, given the expense of those tickets, that I would probably have to wait until they made it into a film, and then I'd rent it at the Red Box or see it on Netflix or something. And anyhow, we went in, we saw this play, which was the best play I've ever seen in my life. It was magnificent, powerful, important, moving, inspiring, and fantastic music. Everything was just, it was probably the most moving and beautiful night of my life. And so why am I telling you this? Is this just some romantic interlude or something? But it was, it was a heartwarming tale of surprise and shock. But I think the reason I'm telling you this is I think you all are in for a similar surprise and shock as we move forward through the coming years with Pacem and Terris. When I first took this position with Pacem, I didn't know just what it was going to be like. You know, I signed up for this. I was impressed with the organization, what it did, what it was doing, with the board of directors, all of that. But it, who knew what it was going to turn into? And it turned into Hamilton. I mean, it turned into this beautiful, wonderful, positive, inspiring time of my life. I've been asked to do a number of things this evening, as you've undoubtedly already noticed. This particular job right now is the one I've been looking forward to. And it's my job to introduce our evening's speaker. Jane Golden has degrees in fine arts and political science from Stanford University. I'm leading with that fact because it demonstrates that Jane has been refining the art of political science and the science of art as a tool for social change for a very long time. She is adept at using art to enlarge our vision and change our society. Jane has been the driving force of the Mural Arts Philadelphia for 34 years, overseeing its growth from a small city agency into the nation's largest public arts program. It's a global model for transforming public spaces and individual lives through art. Under Jane's direction, the Mural Arts has created over 4,000 works of public art through innovative collaborations with community-based organizations, city agencies, nonprofit organizations, schools, the private sector, and philanthropies. That 4,000 public works of art is more than any city in the United States. It is more than any city in the world. This is, to say the least, an incredible accomplishment. Her art has a social conscience, builds community, and changes lives while it brings beauty and inspiration into neighborhoods and the city. I'm going to skip a paragraph here because it basically talks about the history of her, how she started as, a young artist hired by the former mayor Wilson Goode. But I've seen part of her slideshow, so I know she's going to cover some of this, so I'll skip it here and get to the meat of this. Jane has connected the process of making murals to a multitude of community and public outcomes in partnership with a range of city agencies. She has developed groundbreaking and rigorous programs that work through art to make strides in restorative justice, youth education, and behavioral health. These programs have resulted in Philadelphia communities that are more connected, more economically stable, more trauma-informed, among other outcomes. Jane has also overseen a series of increasingly complex, ambitious, award-winning public art projects, as well as launching the Knowledge-Sharing Mural Arts Institute in 2017. Like I said in the first sentence, political science and fine arts from Stanford She's blending these two in incredibly creative ways to change our world. She is an expert on urban transformation through art and has received numerous awards for her work, including 10 honorary doctorates. She is one of my heroes, and I'm confident that after her talk tonight, she'll be one of yours. Ladies and gentlemen, Jane Golden.
Well, Medard, you're one of my heroes, too. So can we have a round of applause for Medard? I think he's awesome and wonderful and inspiring. So this is a really inspiring organization. So first of all, Judy Butler, thank you. Thank you for all you do, and thank your family. And so I'm really lucky because I get to work with Caitlin Butler, who is amazing, one of the most amazing people I have ever worked with. And I've worked with a lot of people over 35 years, but she is absolutely extraordinary. So I'm like embarrassing you, but I'm really sorry, but I mean it. Anyway, but this is, you're right, it's an organization of peacemakers, which my goodness is needed in today's world. So I want to say that our responsibility at Mural Arts is to stretch art as far as it can go. And when we think we've gone far, we should actually go further. We are both pragmatic and aspirational. We walk both those paths, and we apply art to social issues facing our city in Philadelphia, and really now, because of the Mural Arts Institute, cities everywhere. So what I'd like to do tonight, I'm going to give you some background about how we got started. Then we're going to focus mostly on our restorative justice work tonight, which seems really fitting. And I want to make sure I leave time for questions, because I love questions. Okay, so Medard, you're going. Okay. All right, so here's our mission statement. And so we can, that's just like words, but you'll see how we put words to work in a minute. Okay. So everybody, okay, we can go. Okay. I'm so used to clicking. Okay, Philly. All right, so Philadelphia. So as Medard said, so my background is, so I went to Stanford. I was a double major, fine art, political science. I graduated from Stanford. I moved to LA. So then I thought, okay, I'm going to law school. And then when I got to LA, I thought, well, maybe not. My painting professors at Stanford were like, don't go to law school. You should just paint, like just get a boring job and paint. So I was like, oh, okay. I told my parents that. They're like, okay, that seems like strange advice, but okay. So then I got a boring job and I painted, and I was sort of unhappy. And then driving around LA, I saw these beautiful murals, and I grew up with parents who loved the murals that were created in this country during the WPA. So when I was young, I looked at Grant Wood, Thomas Hart Benton, like all the greats, right? And so then, and at Stanford, I studied the Mexican muralists. So when I drove around LA and I saw these murals, I was like, oh, I'd love to do a mural, but that was an abstract thought. So then one day I read the LA Times, and there was an article about the LA mural program. So they said they gave out grants to 10 artists a year. So I was like, oh, maybe I could get a grant. Sure. So I called up the LA mural program, and they're like, oh, well, you're past the deadline, you can call us next year. So I said, oh, that's sad. Well, what if I wasn't? They said, well, you have to find a wall, you have to do a design, you have to do all these things, and you could do that next year when you won't be past the deadline. So I said, okay, well, great, thank you. So then I decided, okay, well, there's no harm, right, in just thinking about Santa Monica if I was going to do a mural here. So I'd researched Santa Monica. There had been a pier, it had been torn down. So I did a design about this pier that everyone felt sad about. So I had this design. So I walked around my neighborhood and I saw this really great wall on this major thoroughfare going to the beach. So I thought, well, why not knock on the door? So there was like a paper mache cow outside. It's funny what you remember, right? It's like 1,000 years ago. And it said, love animals, don't eat them. So I'm like, oh yay, I'm a vegetarian. I'm gonna bond with whoever owns this building. So I knock on the door, this strange looking guy, he was odd looking. He answered the door and he goes, hello. So I said, oh, hello, my name's Jane Golden. I'm new in town and I'm an artist. He goes, he was so disinterested. I said, and I'd like to do a mural on your wall. So he goes, okay. So I was like, oh no, but I'm serious. I would like to paint. He goes, you don't need to say it again. So I said, so you are going to let me do a mural on your wall? And he goes, yes. And I was like, really? And he goes, do we need to keep talking? And I'm like, well, Perhaps not. Perhaps we could end this conversation. So I said, well, I happen to have in my pocket an official, like, Jane Golden legal document that said, I fill in the name, I give Jane Golden permission to do a mural on my wall. I thought I should just bring this document that I drew up 10 minutes prior to meeting this man, just in case he said yes. So he fills it out. I run and just give Jane Golden permission to do a mural. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this. So I'm like, thank you. I put it in my pocket. I'm like, what? So I go home, I'm like, oh. So then I'm like, what's missing? So he says, oh, I looked at my list. Have to hire people from your neighborhood. So I'm like, great. People seem very friendly in this neighborhood. So I go around, I ask people, would you paint a mural? Would you paint a mural? Everyone is like, it's LA, right? They're all in between acting and directing jobs. So I'm like, oh, I got my list. Like, people want to work with me. Like, they don't even know me, but I'm like, okay. So then I put together this like little packet. I call the city of LA, and I'm like, okay, this is Jane Golden again, like as if they remember. Like, oh yeah, you. And they're like, who? I'm like, remember me? I called like 4 weeks ago. And then they said, look, you're still past the deadline. Like you're eternally past the deadline. So then I drove downtown, dropped off the application, and then I like called them every day for months, which Caitlin knows I will do, of course, because I'm like so tenacious. Finally, after months, I get a call, and someone says, I'd like to speak with Jane Golden. I'm like, this is she. And quite literally, they said, we hope we never hear from you again. And I'm like, they said, this is the LA Mural Program. I'm like, ah. So they said, but you have the grant. I'm like, oh, I have the grant. And they're like, yes. And I'm like, oh, that's so great. The grant was $300 to do a wall 20 feet high and 100 feet long. And then I panicked because I'm like, oh my God, I've never done murals. Like I was disingenuous on my application. I said, oh, I did murals all over Stanford University's campus. Like, so then I'm like, I call my friends. I'm like, I don't know how to do a mural. They're like, well, call the city of Chicago. I'm like, really? The city of Chicago? I said, any department in particular? They said, yes. I'm like, city of Chicago. The mayor's office of arts and culture. They have a brochure they can send you. So this is like, you know, again, 1,000 years ago, so no email. So I had to put it in the mail. I got my brochure, and I still have it on my shelf, and I have everything underlined. Do a grid, transfer inch to foot. So I was like, so anyway, I did this mural in Santa Monica. And I tell you this story because standing on this corner in Santa Monica, Ocean Park and Main Street, I like realized, like as this mural came to life, it was so fantastic because it was like people stopped and talked to me about neighborhood issues, community concerns. It was like pretty amazing. And I thought then, what I think now, that everybody should have access to art. It's such a simple notion, but really, I mean, I think there is this idea that art, real art, right, belongs in, you know, behind the walls of museums and galleries. But, you know, I'm going to posit that we should look at it through the lens of equity and say that art is like oxygen and it should be available for everyone. And I think it was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Anyway, so I did this mural, and a very funny story. So then, when I'm painting, the LA Times does this article, and I'm really excited, and I send my parents the article, and the next day this guy drives up in like a Mercedes, and he gets out of the car. I've never seen him before, and he goes, hello, he's in a suit. Are you Jane Golden? So I said, yes, I am. And he looks so serious. He goes, my name is Herb Bolger. So I'm like, I don't know this guy. So he goes, I own this building. And I'm like, oh my God. So I look up the street, and he goes, he's the tenant. And I'm like, oh, there's a difference. I'm like, but he signed my official legal document. He goes, oh, well, it's irrelevant. I like the mural. I'm like, thank you. So anyway, and then when it came time to dedicate it, people go, you should get a celebrity to dedicate it. So I'm like, I'm 22 from New Jersey. Like, I know nobody famous. And they said, Jane Fonda lives up the street. So I'm like, great. So then I go up the street. I'm totally covered in paint. I knock on the door, and she answers. I'm like, Jane Fonda, I'm Jane Golden. We have the same name. I didn't say that. But she's like, I know who you are. And I'm like, you do? And I'm like, oh my God. And she goes, I've watched you and your team. It's all women you have, like lifting paints and moving that scaffolding. She just loved that. She goes, what can I do to help? So I said, would you cut the ribbon at our mural dedication? And she said, yes. Is there anything else I can do? And I often say to Caitlin, like now I maybe would ask her for a donation, but then I just said you can bring friends. She goes, I'm happy to bring friends. And she did. She has a lot of friends, and she brought them. But it was such an exciting moment because people are cheering a mural, a work of art. So I decided, okay, I'm going to paint murals. Now my parents are like, what? So, but they're very understanding. They're very understanding. So I painted murals, I worked with kids for 5 years in LA, and then I got really sick. I have lupus, and I was told I wouldn't live long. So So I was like, oh, it was like my whole life like turned over. And you know, when you get a diagnosis like that, you just like everything sort of stops and goes quiet. And so I just thought, like, all the tenacity I have to figure out how I'm gonna cope with this, make peace with it, maybe learn from it. I don't think I was that wise, but like, you just have to cope with it. So then I came back east. I grew up in Margate, New Jersey, to be with my family, and I started coming up to Philly to Hahnemann Hospital for treatments. And every time I come up, I would read the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I would go like, wow, this is so interesting. Like, Philadelphia is about to have their first black mayor. I didn't know Philly that much, right, because I'd been away a long time. So I was just really intrigued by this, and the whole city seemed so excited. And then, like, Wilson got elected, and then in one of the articles, it said he was starting an anti-graffiti network, and he said, I'm going to work with the graffiti writers to clean up Philadelphia. Very unusual notion, right? And then he said, and it occurs to me that a lot of the kids like art, and I'm going to develop an art component or something like that. So I was like, that could be my job. Like another random thought. So I went home and I wrote a letter to Wilson Good. I said, Dear Wilson Good, I would be so honored to work in your administration. I'm attaching my resume and slides of my work. And I would like, if I'm available for an interview anytime. So about 2 weeks go by, and I go to the movies, I come home, and my dad is like super excited. He goes, you're not gonna believe who called. We got a call today from this man named Oliver Franklin. He is the Deputy City Representative for Arts and Culture for the Mayor of Philadelphia, Wilson Good. I'm like, what? He got my letter. And he's like, yes, and he wants to talk to you. So he said, and then my father goes, he says he knows your first boss in LA. And I go, oh my God, because I thought my first boss in LA was the person I sort of, was really a pest with Judy Baca. So I'm like, yeah, good news, bad news. So then the next day I start calling the city of Philadelphia, probably at 6 in the morning. I'm like, no one's answering. Oh my God, answer, 6:37, 7:30. Finally, I get Oliver Franklin on the phone. He goes, I called Judy Baca and I asked if we should hire you. And she said, Jane Golden will drive you crazy and you should hire her. And I was like, all right. So I went out to Philly a few weeks later. And so Philly at the time was like the epicenter of the graffiti world. It was like a social epidemic. People cleaned it one day, they came back. Graffiti was like everywhere. So I went and I met with this man. That's Tim Spencer, head of anti-graffiti. Tim looks at my resume and goes like this. Okay, if you want the job, you can have it. He said, the salary is $12,500 a year. Your title will be field representative. Is that okay? We're not really sure what to do with an artist. You won't have a desk. That seemed to be some kind of strange sticking point about the desk, but I was like, whatever, I'm flexible. He goes, you'll have about 1,000 graffiti writers. Sort of good luck, right? Like, I was like, whatever, just sign me up. I want to do this job. And when I walked through the office, there were like detectives and graffiti writers, because they have backpacks that make clicking sounds. They seemed to be going in the hallway and writing on walls, and people were chasing them. I'm like, oh my God, my whole life I've loved reading crime novels. Now I'm living in one. Like, it was so like, I'm on the edge. Like, this is so exciting. And I had no idea what I was doing. He takes me down the hall to the art room. It was like a closet. And so, but I was like, oh, but I loved it. So I want to just say some things about anti-graffiti before I talk about this picture. One, I know that history has not been kind to Wilson Good, and I understand about MOVE and I understand everything, but I also I saw another side to Wilson Good. So there was a side to Wilson Good that wanted to do right by people in Philly who had not had a voice. And when it came to graffiti, he could have done what other cities did around the country, and that is he could have just said, we're going to paint graffiti out. He didn't have to start a program. He didn't have to put $6 million on the table to work with young people. So he did something I admire, that when elected officials do this, is that they're creative and they're bold and they fund it. Because let's face it, our elected officials can tell us they're going to do whatever they want to do, and if they're not going to actually fund it and do something about it, it is white noise. And I don't know about you all, but I feel very tired of that. Because let's not talk about the problems. What are you going to do about it in very concrete, tangible ways? And Wilson Good did something about it. And by doing that, he opened up the seat of power to kids from every neighborhood of the city and said, we are now open for business for you. And that, to me, was powerful. And the second thing is that, I don't know about you, but I get very weary of people critiquing government money, because we need government money. Because who else was going to clean up Philadelphia? Comcast? Blue Cross? PICO? Seriously, right? Government is our social safety network. We need it. And this critique of, I want government out of my life, it's like, look, I feel like we are partially funded by the city, and we better use that money effectively and efficiently. That is our moral compact with the city. But I want to tell you something. We need it, and other agencies across the city and cities across this country need it, and that's the end of that conversation, right? And Wilson Good said, and in fact, people were very cynical, and he said, I'm doing it this way. I'm not going to do what other cities are doing. And so anti-graffiti was created primarily to clean up neighborhoods and work with young people and put young people at the center. And why everyone looks so happy in this photograph is that they are swearing they will never write on walls for the rest of their lives, which was not true. So I got there and it was like, okay, what am I going to do? Like, I felt like an anthropologist. Number one, I had to figure out why kids write on walls. Number two, I had to start meeting block captains and civic leaders. Number three, we had to figure out whether people were really interested in an art program. So what we started doing is okay, we're going to start teaching programs. So we started teaching art at rec centers, community centers, the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And then we started, you can go to the next image. And then there we are on the Spring Garden Street Bridge. So then I realized that the young people I was working with had talent and energy and gifts and strengths that had sadly and historically gone unrecognized. A lot of the kids were 15, 16 years old and they had dropped out of high school, but they had extraordinary talent. All we needed to do was open up their black books and see their intuitive sense of design and color and anatomy as if they'd gone to art school. And so it was like this sobering moment of like, asking myself, okay, so we're a city agency, what are we going to do about this? And the truth is, and I'm going to say this from my observation then to all my observation today, is that there's too much mediocrity in the midst for kids in the city. And we become complacent, and we're like, no. Wait a minute, we can just kick this right, we're just like kick it away and say we're going to be excellent in everything we do, and we're going to approach the programming with real rigor. And so when I started to meet like Cool Earl and Disco Duck and Knife and Pez, and I mean, it was like, it was sort of chaotic, and they were going all over the city and writing their name and my name, and I was like, stop. They wrote Cool Jane. I'm like, you have to stop. I've never been cool. But I realized that they just needed an opportunity, and so we started to create pathways for them, and then together, okay, next. We started to create murals because I thought to myself, okay, so they don't like heights, they obviously work outdoors, right, and they love art. We have some common grounds. I am a muralist. They will love painting murals. So I went to my boss, I went to Wilson Good, I said, can we paint murals? And he said, absolutely, 100%. So the city gave me beige paint, big brushes. I was like, this is beige, it's light beige, dark beige, it's a range of beige. I don't think this is good news for artists. And they were like, what? And I was like, we need mural paint. That took 10 years. But nevertheless, we were very tenacious and we finally got art supplies. But we started working everywhere and it was really exciting. This is on the Spring Garden Street Bridge. Next. And if you go to the next one, here we are, the group. Okay, so when we first started when we started painting murals and expanding the art programs, we went around in the neighborhoods and we asked people if they would like art. And people said, you know what we'd really like? Housing, we'd like the graffiti removed, we'd like, jobs. There are lots of things. Our neighborhood's been neglected forever. Like art, not so much. So we would say to people, well, what would you like? And people would always say to us, wait a minute, no one ever asks us what we want. Things are either done to us or not done, and the only visual stimulation we have here are billboards advertising alcohol and tobacco, pretty consistently. And we're not going to the art museum, and we don't, it's like art is not for us. And we were like, no, like, art is really for you. This is the history of the mural movement in this country. It is really about you. So what would you like? And some women in Strawberry mentioned, so we went to Africa. We went to Mount Kilimanjaro, and that's what we'd like. And so we did it. And some people said we'd like Malcolm X, or we'd like Dr. King, or we'd like young people, and that's what we did. We were like, check, check, check. Everywhere we went, we were highly responsive to what people wanted. So early on, this is the gift of anti-graffiti and why it was like getting 3 graduate degrees for me, because as a white person from New Jersey who'd gone to school in California, I did not know Philly. But the Anti-Graffiti Network gave me access. And that was an honor and a privilege to be able to go into communities and meet block captains and community leaders who've been working hard in communities, pushing the boulder up the mountain with so few resources to create change. And that we were able to see art become something that was part of the fabric of that community. Why? Because they were part of the very process of designing it. It was incumbent upon us to go into a community and ask questions and not make assumptions and understand that we did not have the answers, and what we needed to do was value the authorship of that community, that neighborhood, wherever we were working. And because of that, the murals became a beacon and a focal point, a sign that people cared and that things could change and that government could be effective. And when that happened, people start to feel like, wait a minute, we've been in the margins. And that can change too. Like, we're seeing what we think and feel and aspire to on 3-story walls. And that had power, and then people were like, wait a minute, we want the lots cleaned up, or we want other city services, or we want educational programs. But it was like suddenly there was a voice that was very central to them. It wasn't about us doing something right somewhere, because that wouldn't have worked. That would have been didactic and prescriptive. So we started working at the speed of light, and then we did the Dr. J mural, and that was so exciting because people were like, oh my God, Dr. J. And this is painted by a really famous artist from LA who did big portrait murals in LA for like $50,000 a mural, and we had $2,000. We were like, I said, oh, Kent, would you come to Philly and do a mural for $2,000? And he said, if I could do Dr. J in a suit. I said, what? Dr. J in a suit? He goes, I want kids to think beyond sports. So we had to connect with Dr. J, and then Dr. J agreed, and then we did this. But what was so great about this is, imagine this wall, totally covered with graffiti, trash in the lot, and people would say to us all the time, you know those murals you're painting, they're just going to get defaced. And we were like, oh really? So are you saying we're wasting our time? And people would go, exactly. And we're like, well, it's our time, and I guess if we're wasting it, we'll find out, and we'll keep you posted, because we're not going to stop. And so then, every time we did a mural, graffiti stopped. Graffiti stopped, and people would go, oh my God, look at that. When they start to do the art, there's no graffiti. We're like, right, exactly. But beyond that, there was this great sense of ownership and respect about the work. And that's why, when Menard said over 4,200 works of art in the city, people always ask, how many get defaced? Very few, that's the answer. Okay, and then we did Boy with Raised Arm, and the quote, I am large, I contain multitudes, by Walt Whitman. This is by Sidney Goodman. Okay. And then, okay, so fast forward. So anti-graffiti, I was with anti-graffiti for 10 years as like the art coordinator. And my title changed a lot. It was just sort of vague. And I never did get a desk. But I had an undercover police car that when you beeped the horn, the trunk flew open. It was completely mysterious. I have no idea why. But those were my tools. It was very sparse. Anyway, so anti-graffiti, like my former boss passes away. And Ed Rendell is now the mayor, and he says he's going to close the anti-graffiti network. So I think, okay, this is a good time for me to go to law school. So I apply and get into law school. And my brother is a lawyer. So he goes, I don't think you want to go to law school. I'm like, what? Like, I got into law school. Like, this was this big event. I got into law school. And so he said, no, I think you want to run an art program for the city. So I said, well, there isn't one. He goes, well, go start one. Why should that stop you? Go see Ed Rendell. So I was like, well, that's an interesting idea. So I go see Ed Rendell, and I go, well, I think the city should have an art program, like, based in public art and murals. And he goes, well, that's a good idea. Like, I completely didn't think that would be his answer. I was ready for him to say, well, that's completely disinteresting to me. And so I was like, what? I was like, when you're sort of half asleep and you sit up, and I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, where would you like to be in city government? Well, I did come prepared in case he asked that question. So I said, I'd like to work for Michael DeBerardinis, because he's very progressive. He was the new he was the new commissioner of recreation. So he said, okay, just give me like a week. So we gave him a week, and there were only 5 of us left in the little art division because of all the budget cuts, and they called us, they said, come up with a name for yourselves. We said, the Mural Arts Program, and he goes, okay, J-Lo, we're in charge. I was like, So, but I wasn't like in charge of much. Like when you're little and you have like a little like spire detective club, and you're the president, you're the vice president, you're the treasurer, and you have like 10 cents, right? Like all the money had gone away. It was like there were all these budget cuts. It was like, congratulations, you're alive, it's the Mural Arts Program, but you don't have much money. So we were like, yay, we're a pro-art program. We're going to open our doors to all kids, but we don't have much money. We have $100,000. This was like in 98, 99. So I noticed the rec commissioner was raising private money to open up swimming pools. So I'd gone through this program, Leadership Philadelphia. So I said, I went back to the commissioner, I said, oh, can we raise private money to open up pools? And he goes, to do art? And he goes, of course you can. So I called all my friends who were at my table at leadership, like every one of them. And I said, would you be on the board? Would you be on the board? Would you? And they all said yes. So I'm like, oh, I have a board. We can form a board. So then we started raising private money, matching private money with public dollars. More importantly, we started hiring emerging and established artists. We did start reaching out to everyone, not just graffiti writers, because I and we believe very deeply and passionately that all kids should have access to art education. That's another conversation we need to stop having over and over and over again. It's like, why do we have to keep proving this? And so suddenly we were mural arts and we flew into action. And in some ways we never looked back. But we started doing ambitious projects like the Peace Wall in Grace Ferry, where all communication between blacks and whites had shut down. There was a murder, there were beatings, and we said we're going to do a peace wall, and people said you're the most naive person ever, because that is not going to help. Only somehow it changed the conversation down there, and the dedication was the most integrated event down there. And it was a very inspiring project. So now, so at Mural Arts, just so you know, we have 6 departments. We have a restorative justice department, which I'm going to explain. We work with then we have a porch light program where we partner with the Department of Behavioral Health. And then we have an art education program where we serve 2,000 young people. We have a mural making division, and we do big, complicated public art projects. And then we have a tourist division, and then restoration. So that, and there are 55 employees. We contract out with 250 artists every year. I'm telling you, mural arts, it's like Philly is an artist hub. So restorative justice. So we started out, when John Street was mayor of Philadelphia, we had a really big break, because the woman who was managing director, Estelle Richmond, really loved our work and the restorative value of mural arts. And so she realized our budget was very small, and she said, well, what I'd like to do is take you from the rec department, make you part of the Division of Social Services. And I'd like you to think about how art can be part of how big departments do business. Well, that's like music to my ears, because I think that there should be an integrated model of government, and I do think that creativity really matters. And so suddenly, because of Estelle, we started working with the Department of Human Services, Department of Public Health, Department of Behavioral Health, and the Department of Prisons. We started doing small work in the Philly prisons, and then we started working at Graterford Prison with the lifers. When we started working at Graterford Prison, the men out there said they had called me to come give a talk, the art therapist did, and we then got a grant to do a small mural. The mural never really was, like, I couldn't bring the mural to conclusion. Like, every time I thought it would be finished, the men would change it. And finally, I was like, the teachers and I went out there and we're like, look, you've got to finish it. We have a grant from the Arts Council. We have to write a report. The mural has to be done. And they said, well, we're convinced if we finish the mural, you'll never come back. Because most people come out to Graterford, put it on their resume, get a grant, and then they disappear. And so I said, well, because I had heard the men say things that were very moving, that their lives went dark at age 10, and it made me reflect on the kids in our program. And they talked a lot about neighborhoods, and I realized that the men there are not disconnected from the community. Like, we tend to think of people in prison as nameless and faceless, and yet here, I had gotten to know them as very distinct and gifted human beings. And so I thought, well, if we're really serious about committing ourselves to social change in the city of Philadelphia, I'm going to say, how could we not work in prisons, right? So we started working more inside the prison, and then the men said, we would like to do outdoor murals. And I'm like, well, you all are lifers, so you explain to me how that can happen, because that seems above my pay grade to figure that out. So they said, well, they were like, do you have any way we could paint inside and take it out? And I realized, of course we do. We work on parachute cloths sometimes, and they could paint on the inside and we could take it out. So then they said, and we'd like to work with victims. I'm like, okay, so let's make our job really complicated. So then we decided to cook up a project where we work with victims advocates, victims, and the men in the prison, and for several years we did a series called Healing Walls. It was very difficult, it was very arduous. When we would have discussion groups, mostly people would yell at each other, claim they had more pain than the other. It all changed when we started painting together in a giant auditorium where at every table there were people who were victims of crime and the men in the class and the victims advocates. It was all just, there were many, many people involved in this project. It was a giant project. And then people started to see the humanity in each other, and it was really a beautifully inspiring project. And the head of the Department of Corrections, who's rather conservative, saw the beauty in this as well and made our program at Graterford a formal work program. So every year the men, and have for 20 years, create murals that go up on the sides of buildings throughout Philadelphia, thereby connecting them to their kids, their grandkids, their nephews, their nieces, and to the neighborhood. And their message is to their family members, this might be my life, but does not have to be yours. And when their family members drive around and say, I saw your work at Fifth and Dolphin, it like means everything to them. And because of the Supreme Court, a number of the juvenile lifers, thank goodness, have gotten out, and some of them work with the Mural Arts Program now. So the seeds that were planted 20 years ago have borne wonderful fruit. And I feel that we've never, ever, ever, ever should shut the door on anyone. So this is part of Healing Walls. And then we started working in the women's prison at Riverside. And then we started a teeny little reentry program. Okay? And then in 2008, now Michael Nutter is mayor, and the city got a really big stimulus grant. And we went to the deputy mayor for criminal justice, and we said, you know what we would like? We would like to grow our reentry program. That's our dream, and we will put together a proposal if you would let us submit it. And Everett Gillison said, well, you know, the money is really for the DA and for the police, and we were like, we get it. So we made an appeal, and he said, write the proposal, and we did. And we got funding for 5 years to create the Guild program. We called it the Guild because we thought of the Renaissance. And our Guild program trains people in building skills, landscaping, mural making, their parenting classes, financial literacy, on and on. And really, it's about people learning skills and then putting those skills to work almost immediately, impacting the built environment of the city of Philadelphia. So as people change, they're changing something and making a profound difference in the life of our city. And so the Guild, we work with about 100 young men and women every year, ranging in age between 18 and 24. And we work with the Youth Violence Reduction Partnership. A lot of the young men and women are most at risk to commit a very serious crime or be a victim of a serious crime. They have a street worker and they have us. And through a program that is both rigorous but has a lot of love and support, we're able to see a 12% recidivism rate. The national average is really high. I think as a country we're failing. And we have about an 82% rate of employment. We have a jobs developer on staff. So we see people moving on in really positive ways. And for a lot of people who really like art, they can stay with us and keep working on major projects. And here we have Michael Whittington. And we also, for a while, until we lost funding, we worked with young people who were tried as adults. And Michael Whittington was arrested for, he supplied the gun in a shooting that left someone paralyzed. And Michael was one of our star students in the class. So when he got out, we hired him, as we are prone to do. And he came to me and he said, Jane, I need a favor from you. And I said, what's that, Michael? And he goes, I'd like to meet the victim of the crime. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not sure that's possible. So I called the prison commissioner. The prison commissioner said, actually, he thought in the court that the victim's mom had forgiven Michael. He hadn't done the shooting, but he provided the gun. So I got the phone number of Janice, and I called her up, and I said, look, Michael Whittington, I said, look, if you hang up on me, I understand. But Michael Whittington is working for the Mural Arts Program, and he would like to come up and apologize to Kevin. And she said, can we have the next slide? So, that's Kevin, right here. So I said, okay. So I drove Michael up to the Northeast. And Kevin was sitting on the porch, and he's, was a paraplegic. And so Michael looks at me and he goes, I can't get out of the car. I can't do this. So I said, no, this car doesn't turn around. You don't know that, but I'm not going anywhere. I said, because see, you thought Courage was providing a gun in what resulted in a shooting that changed this young man's life. I said, but I'm going to tell you that Courage is getting out of this car right now and going up to Kevin and apologizing for what you did. So I just held the steering wheel. I said, so that's it. That's it for me. So he goes, okay. So he got out, he walked out to the porch, he introduced himself to Kevin, and I went over to talk to Janice, and within 10 minutes they're talking about the 76ers, as if they'd known each other. And then for 2 years, the two of them went to high schools and talked about the impact of gun violence. And then Kevin died from complications due to the shooting. And Michael said that we should do a forgiveness mural. And I said, you're right. I think that's wonderful. And so Janice came and talked at a Graterford. She talked at, detention centers. She talked about what it means to when you hold on to anger and then when you let anger go. And in looking for a wall for the forgiveness mural, we just happened to knock on the door of this building at 12th and Erie, and it ended up being a women's shelter. And the women were like, oh my gosh, it's the mural arts program at the door. Yes, yes, yes. And then the women were like, oh, we all are angry about something and we want to forgive. And so every Thursday night, all summer long, we had painting workshops there. And it ended up being sort of contagious and spreading. And so this is a really wonderful mural about forgiveness. And then we did a project about the impact of prison on families. And this one is really beautiful. It has QR codes in it, so you can actually hear the voices of people who have been impacted by the system. And then here I want to show you some before and afters of projects that the Guild do, so you can see the transformation. It's really powerful, right? It's like this is about infusing beauty into neighborhoods throughout Philadelphia. And for the young men and women who work on this, they become heroes. So people in the Guild always say to me, Jane, I said, how are you? They're like, Jane, this is the best my life has ever been. Like, people are coming up to me all the time and saying, thank you, thank you, thank you for changing my neighborhood. Before, after. This is a rec center. Let's go to the next one. This is a Martin Luther King rec center. Let's go to the next one. There you go, right? The change is indeed profound. And here's a rec center. The kids in the city of Philadelphia should not be going to rec centers and schools that look like prisons. We say change it, shift the paradigm, and if people who've been impacted by the system in a deep and consistent way can hold on to that power and put it to work and change our city, then we're all the better for it. And this, we also worked with the FAC program at the prison. Graterford closed, and now it's the Phoenix, and we continue to work with this program called Fathers and Children Together. And what we do is we provide the art-making exercises so dads and their children can work together. And this is DeJuan Williams. He was at Graterford for 12 years. He came out, he showed tremendous leadership potential, and we hired him to run our Guild program, and he is really inspiring. And then we also do other projects, not just recreation centers. A project like this, right at 9th and Spring Garden, was created by the Guild. And there was a before, this is the after. So this is about global, can we go back to that one? So this is about brain science, and so the Guild helped paint this. We also worked with young people. We took everyone to the Franklin Institute. We learned about the brain, and then we did this brilliant work of art. So it becomes a win-win on every level. Next. And then this is, we worked with the artist Shepard Fairey, who's quite famous. He did the Hope poster when Obama was running for president. Seems like so long ago. So Shepard came and he worked. He went out to the prison. He worked with our Guild program, and he did a series of portraits of people who had been incarcerated but who are doing great things with their lives. And the question to viewers is, can we forgive, or do we see people just one way? That's James Anderson. Next. Before. After, this is a grocery store in West Philadelphia where it was a food desert, and this store is beloved. And this is inside the gymnasium at Riverside Prison. We lost our funding and we just got it back. So we just started running painting and literacy classes at Riverside just recently. We're very excited about that. This is by Jesse Crimes, who's an artist who was in the federal prison system for 7 years, and now he's out. He's been working with us since, I guess, for 5-6 years, and he has gallery representation and getting a national reputation. There we are in an underpass. The underpass is in Philadelphia. Many of them are just in terrible shape, and we know that we can change it and make it beautiful. And that's the Guild. There we are at work. Here's a rec center, Feltonville Rec Center in North Philadelphia. And there, we also go in and we identify what the problem areas are. And so here, our students in the Guild program said, you know what? The students put their backpacks on the floor. They have nowhere to put their backpacks, and so they build cubbies. They build raised beds. They build gazebos. They build outdoor kitchens. I mean, I'm telling you, we're like sort of the do-all mural arts program. There's some of our star students. We are in a dedication. And then we transformed a few bridges in Kensington. We work all over the city, but we've been concentrating in this area where the heroin epidemic is at its height, trying to bring beauty to this part of the city. The bridges are connecting two neighborhoods that had tension, so it's highly symbolic. and they are all working at the barns. So every year we do a project with the barns, and the barns teachers work with our men in the prison class and our guild and teach people about ways to look at art and art history, and then we pick a painting, as we did here, a famous painting that's in the barns collection, and they put their own interpretation on it. So this is called a still life, because the men said that their lives were very still until they were introduced to art. And if you go up to it, there's actually text on that wall that are words from the men and from the guild students. And this is about Octavius Catto, civil rights hero. And so everybody who participated in that worked with researchers and scholars and printmakers and painters and muralists. And so this is a brilliant piece of public art. You know, I feel like in some ways we have shifted the paradigm about how public art is made. Public art, of course, there's a lead artist at the top, and we work with brilliant artists every year, but there are also other ways for people to participate in ways that are noteworthy and valuable, and it can be an incredible teaching tool and lead people to other things. Art can be a lifeline. Next. And then we have a new program that is called Reimagining Reentry, and it's a fellowship program for artists who have been incarcerated. So the question for us is, can we see the glass half full, or do we always see it half empty? Can we realize that there is potential everywhere and provide opportunities and options for people to grab onto? And consistently over 35 years, we have seen that the answer is yes. And this is a photographic mural that wraps around our municipal services building. And this is a brand new project that was just created just a month ago by an artist from Chile, and a local artist in the guild worked on this. And it's about immigration, as you can tell, but it's really beautiful. And this is a brand new mural that we did in an underpass. This is where the first encampment was in Kensington. And a year ago, the encampment was dismantled. And so we had a dedication yesterday with the mayor. And it was interesting to hear the number of people who had been living in tents in this underpass. And for them to come back, a number of people did take the help, were able to go into recovery, and then for them to look and see a beautiful mural here was so inspiring. There's a close-up. And the idea is it's a series of birds, and that the birds were, as the young man from the Guild program said, these are images of birds that were once tethered and now are liberated. And so what's next for us in the world of restorative justice is we are building our Reimagining Reentry program. We have a major show opening at the African American Museum in June. We hope you will attend. And then in the fall, we're going to be having a public art exhibition and a symposium about art and criminal justice. And then we are starting, it's brand new, and it'll be the first time anything like this has been done, an artist in residency program in the DA's office. And so the artist will be a bridge between initiatives the DA is working on and the public. We're very excited about that. And so how can you get involved with mural arts? There are many ways for you to get involved. You can take a tour, I hope you do. We have walking tours, trolley tours, bicycle tours. You can join a paint day at any time, and also come to an event. We have like 150 events every year. We're really busy bees. You can volunteer. We always are looking for volunteers. You can donate. Yay. And finally, I just want to say that there's this quote that I really love that was written by a woman who wrote a book about our work and spirituality. And she said that social change begins when human beings try to make sense of their lives and defiantly refuse to accept the idea that nothing new is possible. You see, because I believe that something new is always possible. And our challenge for all of us is to ask ourselves, what is it we believe in? And then to tirelessly work on behalf of those beliefs, knowing that the world that we create today is the one that we pass on. And certainly, let's hope that it is a world filled with peace, hope, beauty, and art. Thank you. I'm not sure if I have time for a few questions, but I always like questions. Yes?
Two questions. Are you and Brian Stevenson of the Equal Justice Initiative? initiative well planned?
No, but it would be my dream to meet him.
Well, you should. I mean, not that I know him,
I was on a panel and someone said, who would you like to meet? And I said, Brian Stevenson.
it seems to me his work and your work
Yes.
mesh. And my other question is, how well known the work that you've described is to, let's say, suburban faith communities of all denominations in the Philadelphia metro area? How many of them have taken tours? How many of them have discussed among themselves what they've seen? And how many have in any way changed their attitudes about restorative justice in light of those tours?
I would say that's a great question and probably not enough. And I think when people come into close contact with our work, there is a change. One of the most powerful things for me personally, it was the response of the victims' advocates, who many of them were from all over the state. And at the end of Healing Walls, a number of them felt like they had to find, like, a couple of them were involved with probation and parole and felt like they were on their worlds were too punitive, and that they joined like Catholic Social Services or different nonprofits. I mean, they really felt like it was just a change for them just to get to see people up close. And I also think there's a change when people get to see how art can be put to work on behalf of citizens. I think that's very powerful. And so the more people we feel that can see it, feel it, touch it, hear about it, think about it, like the better it is. Not just for the mural arts program, but really for our world. So thank you for that question. Yes?
Yes, I have a concern. Over on Shipley Street here, 6th and 7th, in that area over there, you have a lot of people who experience homeless there, and there's an art center there, a center that they use.
Sorry, where is that?
It's here in Wilmington.
Oh, in Wilmington, I'm sorry, I was thinking about Philadelphia.
So, and recently, the mayor's office and the police have been like finding ways to say, well, you've hassled too many people, so we're going to take you out of the city. You're not allowed to come back. So it's a strategy to move these people out of the city, away from where they can get services and things like that. So, when I hear about something that reminds me of that, like the way this area in Kensington was cleared out. You have the encampment, and people were openly using drugs and things like that. That's what I hear. But whenever I hear about these people being moved away, I'm always concerned about what kind of shortcuts is the city taking and not dealing with these problems and then replacing it with a mural.
Yeah, I would say that's a really good concern, and I think a lot of activists, including ourselves, were concerned about what the city was doing. So I would say, because we're part city, so we're pretty aware of what the city is doing. And I think in Philly, we have a very progressive mayor, very progressive if you follow him at all. And I think we have like the woman who runs homeless services. There are a lot of people who have a really big heart. So people were there day and night providing like services to people, and people were not like moved away like out of the city at all. And I think that this is the dilemma, is that, so the city has to think about the people in Kensington who have lived there a long time and feel like their neighborhood is being taken over by drugs and feel just traumatized by everything going on. And that school kids would go by this encampment like every day. And that the people were defecating. They're like, it's very complicated. I think their challenge was to do it in a way that was not excessively punitive. Now, I can't speak for what's going on in Wilmington, but certainly this wasn't a major displacement effort. And I think they were highly aware, because there were so many activists in their midst in Kensington and around the city, sort of like watching them really carefully to make sure that it wasn't a punitive act, but instead was restorative. Now, did everybody take advantage of services? No. It's complex, but I think evidence of their sort of appetite for different ways of working is their conversation about safe injection sites. And believe me, I've been at meetings where city officials have been screamed at by the community in Kensington because all they want are the drug dealers, drug people taking drugs gone. So there's not a lot of tolerance, and yet the city has consistently shown some resilience and compassion and empathy around this issue. I don't agree with them all the time, but I don't agree with everyone all the time. But I really have to give them some high marks for their work in Kensington. Yes?
I was wondering if you could talk about your institute to help develop mural art programs in other cities. And then the second part is, I don't know if there is a mural arts program. I know there are some murals in Wilmington, but are you working with anybody to develop such a program here? And you were talking about this young woman here. I don't know about how wonderful she is, and I was wondering if that was something in the works in somebody's imagination, because I certainly would like to encourage it. But second, first.
Okay, well, Caitlin does oversee our Mural Arts Institute, and the reason we formed it 2 years ago is because we get tons of calls from around the country and the world, and we answered people in a most random fashion. Like sometimes we answered, sometimes we didn't, and we realized that we had a very strong desire to be more consistent and formal and helpful. And so we were able to get a major grant to get us off the ground. And in Caitlin's our chief strategy officer, so in her sort of universe of mural arts, she oversees that. And it's really it's not about our replicating services in other cities like Dunkin' Donuts, like restarting franchises, but it's more about our building capacity around art and social change issues in different cities around the country. I would say we would have an interest in working with Wilmington. No one's reached out to us from Wilmington, but we would, if you know of anyone, and if they're trying, it would be interesting for us to work here. Did I leave anything out, Caitlin, you'd like to add?
No, Eric Hockaday's done some work here.
Eric has done, so one of our muralists has done some work here. But I think what we try to do is really encourage cities to think about sustainability and what would that look like. So really you need some government involvement, some philanthropy, community, and artists, right? That's the winning formula, because any city anywhere can do a mural or 2 murals or 3. But that's like that can be random, and it can happen, it cannot happen, right? It's like, how do we sort of build in a model that really moves the needle on something? And I think that's what we try to dig in and show people models of different ways that we work. Like in Kensington, we have a storefront where we offer art and social services together, right? Art class, social services, art class, visiting nurses from Drexel, art class, information about where to get a bed, art class, how to get treatment. And 950 people a month come through there, right? So we have all these different sort of ways we work, and that's what we want to share. What's been effective? Other questions? Okay, all right, well, thank you very much. Stay in touch.
That you have this experience as we go forward in time with the new Pacem and Terris under a new executive director, under a partially new board, a whole bunch of new members, and may you all be blessed with surprise and love. Thank you. It was a true honor to work with you over the years.